Hello everyone, and this is BioPhoenix here, and welcome to the very first review of 2020. It's so strange to think that 20 years ago was the year 2000, but I'm just gonna have to get used to it because it's only gonna get more stranger from here on out. So anyways, the game we're gonna be taking a look at today is an RPG on the SNES that got fan translated, and that happened to be The Adventure of Hourai Transfer Student. So the game was developed by Dynamite and was published by J-Wing, and it was released in 1996 and only in Japan on the SNES. But before we talk about the game, we also have to talk about the game's cover art because it's pretty out there. So let's analyze one thing at a time, firstly starting with the main characters. So you got a kid with a gun, you got a tennis player, you got some samurai dude, you got some general chick, and then you got Yippee-ki-yay motherfucking John McClane. And if you look in the background, you see you got some giant monsters, you got an airplane, you even got some like little tiny fairies, and then you look on the other side, you got a giant fucking robot, which also has like some shadow figure on its shoulder. And for some reason, the shadow figure kind of reminds me of something out of Captain Harlock, and then just above that you see some people skydiving. It's like, holy shit. Now that's a cover art that you just can't forget. But moving right along to the more important things, so this is a turn-based RPG that actually takes place in a high school on an island. Now I know there are tons of RPGs out there nowadays that take place at a high school, but this game did it way before any of those. And strangely enough, this game was actually based after a play-by-mail pen and paper RPG, which is not something that happens very often. Oh, and by the way, the game was translated by Aeon Genesis, who has translated a shit ton of SNES games. So now let's begin with talking about the game's story. So you can pick between playing as a male or female character, and it's going to be your first day at Hourai High School. And apparently the school is so huge that it has over 1 million students and personnel, so how the fuck did you manage that? So knowing this, I think it's best that we try to not take this story like super seriously. So okay, you arrive at school by plane, but the thing is, the plane is actually really late, so your main character complains to one of the flight attendants about it, and you know what she does? She boots you the fuck off the plane, like damn, like now that's a way to open up the game. So your character opens up his parachute and he crashes through the assembly hall building and then lands on some other guy and gets him injured, and that's how you make your dramatical entrance to the school. So because of this, a lot of people are talking about your character, and a group of people from a club called Hospo ends up wanting you to join them. So there are 3 members, there's Hinako, there's Daichi, and then there's Haru. And there was a 4th member named Roku, but he was the one that you happened to land on during your dramatical entrance. So they needed to replace him with your main character. And the whole purpose of this is that they're supposed to gather information to help out with the newspaper and such. So technically speaking, they're kinda like detectives almost. And the hideout that they're in is like totally not obvious. It's like a giant hole in the wall that's in like the main character's classroom. Like, how has anyone not noticed that? So to sum up the whole story is that whenever there's something suspicious going on, you and your friends are the ones that have to investigate it. And there is plenty of crazy events that happen within. So overall for the story, yeah, it's pretty basic and nothing mind-blowing, but the thing is though, the dialogue in this game is actually pretty damn funny. And it really fits well with the game's tone because, as I said, this game's tone is not very serious and it doesn't really try to take itself seriously, so I think it kind of fits well. And I've heard a lot of people say that this game's writing style kind of reminds them of Earthbound, and you know what? I can kind of see that. Mostly with the quirky dialogue though. Of course, this game doesn't deal with anything super deep like the whole, like, you know, the first time Ness built his first snowman and how it's always there with him in his heart. Yeah, this game doesn't have anywhere near as deep as that. But it is more of a lighthearted story that is more campy than anything. So now, as for the gameplay, so first thing I have to touch on is the clubs. So essentially, the clubs in this game is like a job system. You can join 3 of them at once, and you gain EXP within these clubs, and whenever you master these clubs, you permanently get those skills, and then you can freely leave those clubs, and then join like newer ones that acquire more skills. So there are 33 clubs in total in the game, but you don't have access to all of them right away. In fact, some of them you actually have to try and find later on. So just for some examples, you got some like typical ones, you got like different maths and science, and you got kendo, karate, baseball, archery, all that kind of stuff. But then you get like other weird ones, like you even get like video games, anime, so you can brag to your friends at how much of a big weeaboo you are. In fact, one of the skills that you can get within that club is actually anime song. So you get to sing your favorite anime intro or something. I don't know. It's weird. And then there are some clubs that are not at the main campus. They're hidden throughout the island, such as the Rock and Roll Club and even the Alchemist Club. So there is a lot of customization that you can do with your characters, but of course there are certain characters that cannot join certain clubs. Like for an example, Haru cannot join the anime club because I guess he's just not weeb enough yet. But also going on with the game's humor though, there's actually a lot of different items and magic spells in the game that are actually named very differently than what you'd think. Like an item that restores a little bit of GP, which is like MP in the game by the way, it's called Relaxing CD. And then you also got an item called Cardboard House, which allows you to gain a certain amount of HP and GP at the same time. Yeah, it's pretty strange alright. But as for the game's exploration, it's exactly what you would expect. It's a top-down view where you got like the world map, and then you got like different sections, like you got like the area where like the boys' dorm is, and you got the one where the girls are, and finally the one where the main campus is at. But of course there's plenty of other areas that do open up as we progress through the game. And as for the game's battle system, I mean, it's a typical turn-based that's done in a first-person perspective. Another thing that is very similar to Earthbound. So you have your commands like attack, special, auto, apologize, which is run away, and swap out. So your maximum party number can actually be 8, but you can only use 4 at a time, so you can swap out like the ones that are in like your other 4. And just by the way, there is 17 playable characters throughout the entire game, though not all of them are like main priorities, a lot of them are optional. But anyways, back to the main battles though, so yeah, they're pretty standard stuff. Nothing too complicated to cover here, but man, I gotta say, some of the monsters within this game are pretty over the top. So just for some examples that I can give, you got like an angry teacher that just, I guess, roams the land trying abusing random students that comes by. And then you got a lost student who, I guess, lost his way to get to his next class and now has to live like an Neanderthal. Then there's dudes with penguin suits that have like happy faces that kinda remind me something out of one of those Side Night and Happiness comics. A wandering pineapple that has arms, legs, and a face. A gargoyle that looks almost exactly like Ridley from Metroid. A blue owl that looks exactly like the front cover of Fly By Night from the band Rush. Evil Santa Claus, and finally I'll mention is an evil chicken. Yeah, this game actually has a weird fascination with evil chickens. But I gotta admit though, it's pretty funny. So now, let's get moving on to the other things, like the graphics. And the graphics in this one are pretty decent, but of course, for 1996 standards, it definitely isn't as amazing as what it could be. Because most SNES games that I've seen that came out in 96, they all look really good. Where this one, it definitely doesn't look cutting edge, but at the very least though, it does at least fit with the style that it goes for. It's a very quirky looking game. So the game is bright and colorful, which is good, and it does have an art style that fits the game, and like I said, like a lot of the crazy enemies in this game, they all look pretty good. But as much as there is like a lot of unique enemies in the game, of course there are going to be some palette swaps that you will notice later on in the game. But I don't have a huge issue with palette swaps. I mean, it's understandable why they do it. But at least the monster sprites do look good, and I do like the game's backgrounds as well. And the character portraits do look really nice in this game, and as for the characters on the map, well, they look okay I guess, nothing too crazy memorable, but that's okay. But overall, I'd say that this is a pretty decent looking game. Obviously for 1996, it's not what I would say the best, but it at least does the job just fine. So now, let's get talking about the game's music, and the music in this one is actually really awesome. A lot of the songs are very upbeat and catchy. And I really don't think there's a bad song within the game. All of them just sound really good, and you know why? This game was composed by Hitoshi Sakamoto. Yeah, the same guy that did stuff like Tactics Ogre, Final Fantasy Tactics, Radiant Silvergun, Grim Grimoire, and finally I'll mention is Valkyria Chronicles. So knowing this, I can definitely recommend listening to the OST, it's real good. So now, if you want to go out and buy this game, so weirdly enough, I actually found more reproduction carts than I have like original copies of the game. So most of the repros I've seen were usually going for about like 20 to 30. But as for the original copies, well, I only found one, and it was complete in box, and it was going for $600. Well, shit, I guess that's the equivalent of a complete in box copy of Earthbound in North America, but only that this seems to be even more rare in the sense that I only found one on eBay. So if you really want to own a physical copy of this game, might as well just repro it up at that point. So now, as for my overall thoughts on The Adventures of Hourai, Transfer Student, is that this game is actually pretty decent. Now yes, I said the game is decent, not great or amazing, but it's also really not a bad game at all. So as always, let's go over what I like and what I didn't like. So the story in the game, while it isn't anything mind-blowing, I like the writing to it. I thought it was really funny. I thought the characters were interesting and yet again funny, so I thought it was like really good on that department. And as I said, the tone of the game never takes itself like super seriously anyways, so this is exactly the kind of game you should be playing if you do want a game that is, comedy relief. I like the way how the class system works with like joining different clubs and such. I thought that was pretty cool. And the game's music is like really freaking good. Now as for the things that I didn't like about this game, now while the battle system is very simplistic, I don't mind that so much in like these like old school RPGs, but I do find that they can be a little bit on the slower end. Now it's not like the worst that I've ever seen, but it definitely could have been picked up the pace a little more. Just as an example, when I reviewed the game Song of the Angels on SNES, that game came out before this one, and that one was like super fast. Like you didn't even need a turbo mode, that's how fast it was. Where this one, you're just constantly spamming B and A just to try to skip over that dialogue as fast as possible as you're battling. And probably one of my biggest complaints with the game is that I find that the game's encounter rate is like sky high, like oh my shit. Out of all the SNES RPGs that I've played, this one is definitely the worst for that. Almost as bad as Cyber Knight, but thankfully though, this game, it like totally curve stomps the shit out of that one. Another thing that I'm not a huge fan of though, is that whenever you're about to use like an item or like a magic spell within the battles, it doesn't actually tell you what they do. Like the only way to know what they do is to open up the menu like when you're on the map. So whenever you're in the battle, you just have to remember exactly what they do, and because in this game, like, everything is, like, renamed as something very creative and cute, of course, it's a little hard to remember what everything does. And while some items are pretty obvious of what they do, other ones I just kinda just, like, take a guess and just use them up anyways. So I really do think that within the battles, this game should have at least had, like, a text box to tell you what it does. Now this next thing I'm about to mention is not so much a complaint from me, but I can see it being a complaint for some, is that this game is actually really easy. Now for me personally, I don't think every single RPG needs to be hard as shit in order to be good. I think there needs to be a balance between having some games being really hard and challenging, while other ones being more on the easier end for certain people to get into. And yes, this game definitely falls into the category of easier for people to get into. So if you're one of those who are expecting this to be like a hardcore SMT style game, then well, yeah, you're gonna be pretty disappointed. But if you're one of those who likes the more relaxing RPGs that you can just chill out with every now and again, then this one isn't bad for that. And one quick thing I have to bring up is that, remember what I said about there being like 17 playable characters in total, but most of them are just optional? Yeah, in this game on my playthrough, I missed like most of them. And apparently one of the ones that I missed was a robot. Yes, a robot can join your party in this game, and even a starfish, like, holy crap. So there is some things in this game that can easily be missed, but can add more to replay value if you so choose to desire. So yes, personally, I do kind of like the game for what it is, but I definitely wouldn't say I love it though. I would recommend it, but only for those that, like I said, want a more like chillaxing time and don't want anything super complicated. And I personally do think that this game is way better than some of the other SNES RPGs I've looked at before, such as ones like Cyber Knight or La Place No More, because, those ones I thought were kind of crappy. And it's a shame that I didn't love those games as much as I wanted to, but I just gotta face reality that I just didn't like them. But as for comparing to Song of the Angels though, while I do think this game has a better story and writing than Song of the Angels, but however, I find that Song of the Angels has better like gameplay mechanics where not only do I like the speed of the game, but I also just like the fact that you can like talk to different monsters and learn languages and such. So yes, it's a bit of a difficult game to recommend for everyone, but I do find that it was a pretty decent time and I did have some fun with it. So with that said, thanks for watching, commenting, and have yourselves a great day.
Best translation job ever!